Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Teruma is Perek Yud Halacha Vav. We're learning today Daf Tzadik Vav. We're starting on Daf Tzadik Vav Amid Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amid, right by the new Mishnah by Halacha Vav. Now, the Mishnah will come back to the dinim of Teruma, but in the context of the sugya of Nois and Tam, our Mishnah, as we'll read it, is speaking about pickling. However, we will have on Daf Tzadik Vav Amid Beis Rabbi Yochanan's different girsa in the Mishnah, and that will be very consequential. According to Rabbi Yochanan, our Mishnah is speaking about partial cooking, called in the Yerushalmi Shalika. But let's go back, as we will learn the Mishnah, Lefi Girsa Seinu, that we're speaking about pickling, and our Mishnah, the Tanakama, the Mishnah is going to say that all vegetables. I know when we say the word all, there are always exceptions. The first exception will be olives that we just learned two Mishnayos ago. But the Mishnah will give you the general rule that vegetables that are pickled together will never transfer flavor one and the other. Evidently, our girsa in the Mishnah does not subscribe to the opinion that kavush kemevushal, because when you pickle things together, they are soaking together in brine and juices and liquids, and some of them are even sharp for 24 hours or more. And according to halacha, as we'll speak out more how this evolved in the Bavli, different shitos, we actually paskin that kavush kemevushal. But coming back, our Mishnah, the way our Mishnah has the text, doesn't subscribe to that. And therefore, the Mishnah will give you the rule that vegetables pickled together do not transfer flavor one or the other. Again, it's obvious that olives are different because that's how we began this whole topic, by olives. The Mishnah itself will make an exception when it comes to vegetables that are in the category of chisis. Chisis are pungent vegetables, which include onions, garlic, loof, and many other sharp vegetables. Those will be exceptions. But if not for the sharpness of the vegetable itself, just by the fact that they are even being pickled together will at least demand salt water. Our Tana holds that they do not transfer flavor one and the other. Now, we're going to have various other Tanoim in our Mishnah. We're going to have the Shita of Rabbi Yossi. We're going to have the Shita of Rabbi Shimon. They go even further. They say that even if you partially cook things together, they also do not transmit flavor. They also give an exception, as we'll read it inside. Their exception is when it comes to teradin. I know teradin, maybe in modern Hebrew, means beets. It could mean,
spinach in modern Hebrew.
Very good. So teradin is going to be referring to some sort of leafy vegetable that maybe is similar to beech. But be that as it may, teradin is an exception. And the other big topic, there are many big topics in the Mishnah. The whole daf today is really, I know it's only one amid, but it's huge. He said, even though we mentioned yesterday, we quoted our Mishnah, that Rabbi Shimon holds that when you have two cabbage, you have a cabbage from an irrigated field. And it means a field that needs to have human irrigation, which, as the Gemara will today conclude to explain, even though you would think that if the field is irrigated, so everything there is saturated with water. It's not that way. A field that needs human irrigation is a field that even after you irrigate it, everything there is a little bit dry. So there is a lack of internal moisture. A cabbage that grows on a field that suffices on God's rain, right? Stay habal, bal means the emes of balabas do evishter. Interestingly, the product there has more moisture. And so Rab Shimon holds that if you are going to connect them, whether it's going to be through pickling, whether it's going to be through cooking, partial cooking, full cooking, avada, everything transmits flavor to everything else. Rab Shimon holds that if the Gemara will clarify that if the one that came from the natural irrigated field was truma, then the other cabbage, which is drier and therefore it's more prone to absorb, the other one will become asur lizarim. The chiddush of this case, as we explained yesterday, is because you would have thought that since it's min b'minoi, which means cabbage, which means the tam of the truma cabbage is not discernible because it's the same tam. You would think maybe bichlal doesn't create a problem. Don't forget, we're not talking about a zor eating truma. We're not talking about the ikir. We're only talking about tam. That's the chiddush of Rab Shimon that says that no, that nevertheless the tam of this cabbage goes into that cabbage, and therefore also lozarim. And Rabbi Akiva argues. Now this is huge. Now there are different ways of understanding Shitas Rabbi Akiva. We're going to go with today with the Marav Fulda. Rabbi Akiva says that when you have two macholos, one is asur, not only truma, treif, one is kosher, with the exception of meat. If it's min b'minoi, Rabbi Akiva holds even if you cook them together. Imagine, the one that's permitted remains permitted. It's like, wow. Because since the tam of the isur is not discernible, the whole isur of tam ki ikir is only if you taste the tam. I want you to know that this is huge. But when it comes to the tam, I don't want to get into it that much today. Maybe we'll speak about it a bit more tomorrow. What exactly is tam? I want to know whether juices are included in tam. Because maybe you can, the problem is that juices is like the ikir. Like, how does the flavor go from one into the other? I get it. The salad doesn't go one into the other, but the juices go into the other. Like, there's a very fine line between the ikir and the tam if we include juices, the moisture in tam. But anyways, we'll see why meat might be an exception. The Mishnah will also speak about the uniqueness of liver. Mishnah is going to tell you that when you cook liver, being that liver is so saturated with blood, it's going to be constantly expelling the blood. Either the tored lemiflat loibola. That means even if you're going to cook today for liver, this is already meat. Liver and liver from a basa nevela, liver from a basa shchuta. The Mishnah is going to tell you the liver from the basa shchuta you can take out of the pot and eat. And we're going to have tomorrow a question: what happens if you cook liver in chalav? Like, how far do we say the Mishnah? Do we say also it was none of the milk went into it, and therefore you can eat it? We'll get to that tomorrow. The Mishnah will speak about eggs. These are big sugyas, guys. Many of what we're learning right now in Yoreh Deah, each one has a separate siman. Many clauses in our Mishnah demands a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch. Eggs, even, I'm talking about chicken eggs, the eggs that we eat, even when it's shelled, even when it's unshelled, that means when it's still closed, there are porises in the shell, and the egg is able to absorb. And this is very consequential. I know that nowadays it's not that relevant because nowadays they don't allow the roosters to be near the hens. I don't want to get into a whole topic. So really the blood, even if there is a blutstrap, today it's only asur midrabanan. Today. When I grew up, it was asur d'oraisa. Because if there is a rooster, then that blood is from the beginning of the creation of a fetus. It's a huge difference in halacha. Even b'poyel mamish, when I grew up, a bakery was chayiv to check the eggs. Today, I don't believe any of the bakeries check their eggs. They don't have to. Al pidin, you don't have to, because the whole Isser is only Isser midrabanan. And by the way, even when you find the blood in the egg, be'emes, we learned this in Shulchan Aruch, it would have been enough just to remove the blood part of the egg. I know that people throw out the whole egg. It's a whole different din. We'll speak maybe again in another shir about the eggs, but the Mishnah will introduce about the ability of an egg to absorb even through its shell. We're going to have a case of not barnat, even though b'poil we're going to learn the Gemara will learn the Mishnah otherwise, but we're going to introduce not barnat like awesome cases, and I'll leave it at that. Chevra, this Mishnah, I should have thought about it before. Pasha to write on every couple of lines what siman it is in Shulchan Aruch. That's how many topics we're going to touch. So, Chaver, without any further ado, Daf Tzadik Vav in the beginning of the mission. Our girsa is Kol Hanich Bashim. The Gemara is going to right away say that Rabbi Yochanan had a different girsa. But we're going to read our girsa right now. Nichbashim means items that are being pickled together. This Mishnah does not subscribe to the fast and hard rule that kavush k'mavushal. Kavush k'mavushal means that even if there is no pickling brine, even if there's no salt, stam water, when something is sitting in water for 24 hours or more, there's going to be a transference of flavor. That's the way we paskin. Our Mishnah does not hold with that. We don't say kavush k'mavushal. Elama, when you're pickling things together, since pickling means that you're putting it in there for it to be preserved, and you put salt in the brine, so there's a sharpness in there. All of the things that we pickle have a certain sharpness. So therefore, there's a havamina that the koyach of the sharpness of the pickling of the salt will create a transference. So lumashal, there are many applications. We're learning the Masechtas Truma. So you have a vegetable of Truma that's being pickled with a vegetable of Chulin. Question will be, may a non-kohen eat the vegetable of Chulin? Maybe it absorbed the juices, the tam of Truma. So the Mishnah holds, Kol hanachbashim zeh im zeh mutarim. We learned the two Mishnayos in ago about olives. Olives is an exception that the Mishnah doesn't even have to give. I know that olives are not vegetables, but I'm saying there are exceptions. But even in vegetables, says the Tan of this Mishnah, Ella im hachisis. The word chisis is a generic word used for sharp vegetables that include garlic, onion, loof, and I'm sure many others. So if there is an inherent sharpness in the vegetable, then they will transmit the flavor. And the sharper one is the one, let's say, is the male, and the non-sharp is going to be the makabel, just to know how it works. The Mishnah will make that clear. So if the onion is of truma, then the carrot cannot be eaten. Now, and the Mishnah makes it clear, since chisis, the category of chisis is an exception. So if the chisis is of chulin, and we'll see that's really not what's the point, but the Mishnah will just go through the cases. So let's give one of the categories, one of the sap categories of chisis will be onions. If you have onions of chulin, and it's being pickled in chisis shal truma, that's the key, that it's chisis shal truma. Or yarak shel chulin. Yarak means a non-chisis type of vegetable, a carrot. Im chisis shel truma, which is the problem. In other words, the issue is not what's the chulin. The chisis is not needed to absorb. The chisis is the prerequisite for something to transmit, for something to expel. Once it's expelled, the other one is going to absorb. Then we're going to say that it's also, the sharp truma bulb will impart flavor into the chulin one, but in the other way. But even if you have chisis, but if the chisis is only of chulin, and the truma vegetable in yarak shel truma, that's the key. So the one that's problematic is not sharp. Our Tana holds that even though it's laying inside a pickling brine, I don't care for how much time, more than 24 hours. Nevertheless, the chulin one will remain mutter even to a non-kohen. And I want you to know that the same will be when it comes to other isurim. As an example, if you have
Bayarak, the Tanakh means Bayarak, it's going to remain.
In other words, if the truma was the yarak, if you had a carrot of truma, even though it was pickled in a vat, then the chulin vegetables will be permitted. Don't forget, we're not talking about the juices that we spoke about last Mishnah ago. Juices are something else. Juices, you have to have the bittul and the shiurim that we learned. We're speaking about the vegetable, that the vegetable will not absorb according to this Tana. And now this is so shocking, as we'll see in Amid Beis, that Rabbi Yechanan has a whole different girsa. And by the way, we paskin, in other words, we paskin that what we learned is not even written in the Mishnah. We paskin like Rabbi Yechanan. Or in the Bavli, we paskin the way Abaye understands Rabbi Yechanan, because in the Bavli, there's a machlekes, what is shitas Rabbi Yechanan? In the Yerushalmi, we lechatchila quote Abaye's understanding of shitas Rabbi Yechanan. We'll get to this when we get to the Gemara. Okay, now let's go even more. Now let's go into shalika. In the Bavli, this word is used when something is overcooked. Many times you cook something for it to become legamri soft. Almost everything becomes soft when you cook it. Egg is the exception. That the more you cook it, the harder it gets. That's one of the reasons we have an egg on the Seder. But shlika means partially cooked. So vadai, when you cook things together, there is a transmitting of tam, vadai, cooking. Cook two things together. If you don't have the level of bittul, and we have to remove the ikir, you got a problem. We all know that. But shlika could be different because it's only partially cooked. How do we define partial? I don't know. But here we have in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi Yomer, that kol hanishlakim im hatiradin asurin, Vegetables that only undergo partial cooking together. Again, the issue here will be one vegetable is truma, one vegetable is chulin, with the exception of turadin. Turadin, again, is either some sort of leafy vegetable that's related to beets. Yakir said that, or Yerushalmi is saying that it goes to spinach. Turadin many times means beets. In the Gemara, it's related to beets somehow. That other than turadin, even partially cooking, imagine vegetables together, there is no imparting of tam into the chulin vegetable. That means you can take the chulin vegetable out of the pot and you can eat it, meaning a non-kohen. By turadin is different because shehein, the turadin anois and tam. Wow. And again, which one has to be the truma one? The turadin has to be truma.
Tam's for sure not spinach. Rolling beets, they get the tam. Not spinach.
Not spinach. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, it doesn't. It's sharp. Beets are sharp. Now comes a new topic, and this we already mentioned in the introduction, and this we learned yesterday. Even though we already learned the machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Shimon, noisen tam lev gam, whether asur or muter, and there's a machlokes again between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan bishitas Rabbi Meir. But all of the noisen tam means that you had min b'she'ena minoi. Yeah, this is important, Rabbi Yaakov. When you have min b'minoi, there would be a logic to say, as Rabbi Akiva says in our Mishnah, that the tam that's coming from the isir, from the truma, won't be discernible in the davar hamuter because it already had that taste. It didn't add anything. It didn't change anything. It wasn't noisen tam. One might have thought, therefore, b'chlal, there's no problem if it's min b'minoi. Rab Shimon says, yes, it is a problem. Even though Rab Shimon is the one that says, noisen tam livgam is muter. In the Babli, Rab Shimon says, noisen tam livgam, post facto will be okay when we paskin b'di'evid. We only paskin b'di'evid. In the Yerushalmi, it's much more. The way the words were learned in the Yerushalmi is that Rab Shimon holds, noisen tam livgam lechatchila is muter. Noisen tam livgam is muter. But neutral flavor, non-discernible flavor is a problem. And the example that he gave was cabbage. And, basically, milsa agav urcha komash malan. We're speaking here about a cabbage from a field that the Mishnah calls shikya. Shikya means a field that also needs human irrigation. And even though the Mishnah does not make it clear, and we're going to conclude today's daf by the Gemara asking in what direction does it go, but I'm telling you, the maskana of the Gemara is that something that grows in an irrigated field, even though it was irrigated by human beings, that means we added more water than only the rainwaters. It doesn't work that way. Items that grow in that field will have less internal moisture. A vegetable or any product that has less internal moisture, remember, is more prone to absorb. And I'm adding that detail because since the Rabbi Yossi holds that non-teradin, even if you were shoylik one and the other, Rabbi Yossi holds they don't impart flavor. Rab Shimon agrees to Rabbi Yossi. By cooking, they always impart flavor. Partial cooking, Rab Shimon holds like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi spoke about an exception of teradin, that if the problem is teradin, the truma is teradin, then the other one will absorb even by partial cooking. Rab Shimon is going to give you another scenario. That if you have cabbage is not teradin. But if the cabbage of chulin, that's the way the Gemara will make it clear, is of shikya, even though the Mishnah doesn't write the word chulin, and it was shoylikt, it was partially cooked, im kruv, shel bal means the balabas, a field that God Almighty gives all the rain, it doesn't need any added human irrigation water. Those products are more moist. So even though it's kruv, and even though you're only being shoylikit, the fact that the kruv of the shikya already begins with less internal moisture, it absorbs. It's like a tzama l'chanafsha, Bal Tshuva absorbs more kedusha because they're thirsting. So it's asur. And the chiddush here, first of all, b'reishu boileya. There's so many, look how much wisdom is here. In other words, first of all, Rab Shimon is basically saying, I agree with Rabbi Yossi. I'm going to give you another exception. in which you don't need to have the teradin. This whole idea that one vegetable is less moist, one vegetable is saturated with water. But the other thing that Rab Shimon is trying to be mechadesh is that kruv and kruv have the same tam. So Rab Shimon is saying that even though they have the same tam, which means that, okay, it's boileya. One can argue the kruv of chulin was boileya, the tam of the kruv of truma, but whoever eats it, even a maven, won't taste the new added flavor because it's the same of the old flavor. Says Rab Shimon, I don't care if it's not discernible. The tam is in it, and therefore it's also. And on this, Rabbi Akiva argues, on this final detail, Rabbi Akiva Omer, call, and now he says something even more. You know, it's Rab Shimon and Rabbi Yossi, they were talking about nishlakin. Now Rabbi Akiva is going to speak about full-fledged cooking. So we went from pickling, an hour of girsa, the Reisha's pickling, not Rabbi Yochanan's. From there we went into shulakin. Now we're going into misbashlan. Now we said bishul. You kidding? When you cook two things together, even the Tanakama holds any two vegetables. If you have truma and non-truma, the non-kohen cannot eat the other vegetables because you cooked it together. Says Rabbi Akiva, if it was min b'minoi, carrots and carrots, you can take the carrot of chulin out and eat it. If you know which one it is, it's very important. The whole thing here is that their issue here is that the be'en is not an issue. You know which one it is. Kol hamispashum zemzem mutarim. But even Rabbi Akiva is moided to one exception. Ella im habasar. I want you to know that the words ella im habasar, we have time. You want to see mamish min akotza la akotza? Look, we're going to read the Pnei Moshe, and then we're going to read the Marafulda. I'm reading the Marafulda second because we're going to, from going forward, only learn the Marafulda. The Pnei Moshe is 2 lines under the Gemara. That Rabbi Akiva is moide elam abasar. What does that mean, according to him? That im nisbashal hayerek shel truma im basar. No, it's the im abasar is also vegetable and vegetable. But if prior to you cooking truma vegetables and chulin vegetables, min b'minoi, prior to that, first you took, let's say, the carrot. You took a carrot and you put it of truma and you put it in meat. Now what happens? Meat and vegetable is min b'she'ena minoi. So the carrot of truma has in it the tam of meat. Now you take the carrot, this carrot, and you put it with a chulin carrot that was never cooked with meat. That's where Rabbi Akiva says, now you cannot eat a chulin carrot. Why? Because it is discernible. Because you can call this not banat, but because the tam of the meat that went into the basar, it went into the carrot, that tam went into the other carrot. And that is not like the chulin carrot. Chulin carrot is only carrot. Truma carrot is carrot with tam basar. Even though the tam went in, and now the tam has to go out. Noisan tam bar noisan tam. Mepnei shehabasar mekabel tam hayorik va'asar. That's what the Pnei Moshe says. What the Pnei Moshe is saying in between the lines, that if you have 2 pieces of meat, and I want to speak about not only the truma. I know we're learning Masechtas Trumas. You have a basar nevela and a basar shchuta. According to the Pnei Moshe, according to Rabbi Akiva, listen to these words. You'll fall off your chair. If you cook terefa meat and kosher meat together, you can eat the kosher meat. Why? Because there was no, if you know the meat, if you know that you're eating. Why? Because of Rabbi Akiva Shita. Because the tam that's problematic is not problematic if it is not discernible, if it's neutral, if it's min b'minoi.
Cooking betzliya or cooking in the oven?
Cooking, any way you want to cook it. In juice. Shocking. Now look inside.
You're saying the yeg
I take back what I said. What I said is on Amud Beis. He's saying that if it's basar and yarek, then it's aser. Even more. In other words, Rabbi Akiva is not making an exception. He's saying min b'she'ena minoi is a problem. It's only min b'minoi. Look in the Marafulda. Rabbi Akiva Omer call Rabbi Akiva. Now I'm going in the Marafulda 2 lines before the end of the narrow. Rabbi Akiva Omer call iser v'hetanam is bashum zemzeh v'hein min echad mutarim. Why? Like we're saying, she'ein noisnan tam zebazeh chutz mibsar iser v'heter shenesbashlu biyachad da'asurim. That's something else. He's saying that By meat, now why are we machmer by meat? No one knows. Read inside. And Maraful does not by himself. The reason why the Pnei Moshe did not learn like the Marafulda, because he argues with the Marafulda. Because he holds that L'shitas Rabbi Akiva, if you cook meat, basar shchuta, basar nevela, you can have the basar shchuta. That's what Rabbi Akiva is saying. That she'ein noisnem tam zemezeh. Why? Because it's not discernible, because it's min b'minoi. It's like, wow. Wowee. Now let's go even more. Next shock on top. Rabbi Yechman and Uri Oimer. Kaved, liver. Liver is a unique beria. In Shulchan Aruch, there's a whole siman. I forgot which siman. Somewhere in the 90s, right? Sadik something. That about kaved. Now, what's the issue of kaved? First of all, kaved is filled with blood. Really, there is a shaila in halacha. We'll speak more about this tomorrow, God willing, whether kaved is basar or maybe kaved is blood. If kaved is blood, how are you even allowed to eat it? We're going to speak about this tomorrow. Different ways. And by the way, we don't do malicha by kaved. The only way we eat kaved is by roasting it, because roasting draws out the blood more than salting, and it seals it. Sealing it means that, just to know that even though we're not allowed to have blood from an animal, midoiraisa, but that's only if the blood moved from its natural place. When the blood is in its natural place, we are allowed to eat it. Problem is when you cook meat, the cooking moves the blood around in the meat. When you roast something, it's not that halacha says the roasting draws out all the blood. It's not that. Roasting draws out some of the blood, and the other blood is sealed. It becomes nikba b'makoymai, which is why we can have roasted liver. We only have roasted liver. But let's go back over here. Here we're speaking about cooking liver. So he says that since liver is so filled with blood, saturated with blood, when you cook it, it's going to continuously expel blood. And while something is busy expelling, at that time, it's incapable of absorbing. This is the whole Hasidic word about all of the people that are involved with Yidden that are not yet frum, and people are concerned you might absorb from them things or behaviors that are not al pi halacha. I did the Torah lemiflat leibara. If you're busy being a mashpia, you won't be mekabel. That's the din over here. So you're expelling. It doesn't go in two ways at the same time. So he says, but the eino neseres. So when you cook, no, Rabbi Yechman is saying, we learned before min b'minoi. Let's go min b'minoi. I'm talking about kaved, liver that's nevela, and liver from a basar shchuta that were cooked together. Both of these kaveds will constantly be expelling blood. And let's go with the Marafuldas Pshat and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, meat and meat, you can't have the meat. Kaved, according to Rabbi Yechim, you can have it. Even if you cooked it with kaved. Avade, if you cooked it with something else. Why? Mipnei, it does not become asur. Mipnei he poiletis, it's constantly expelling, it's constantly expelling blood, and therefore, ve'eno balas, it will not absorb. In other words, it's covered with anything. In other words, if I cook kaved, let's go min b'she'enoi minoi. If I'm cooking kaved, with a carrot of truma, says Rabbi Yechon ben Nura, non-kohen can have the kaved. Min b'she'enoi minoi, it should absorb some of the time. No, not liver. Liver is constantly expelling blood. It's amazing, even with kaved. Next, Daf Tzadik Vav Amud Beis. Now we'll go into another siman in Shulchan Aruch. Eggs, all of the shilas that we have today. Guys, do you remember that when it comes to eggs? I know about many people that learned smicha didn't learn this for the bechina, but first of all, when I learned smicha way back then, we needed to learn Hilchos Treifus. So there's another whole big change that they're making a lot of changes for the good. But anyways, when it comes to eggs, if you remember, I know we mentioned yesterday the shiurim. Normally by tam it's echad b'shishim. By eggs it's echad b'shishim va'achas. And the eggs that I'm talking about is if there was an egg that was a beginning of a development of a chick, not our blood. Like I said, it's only us and midrabanan. A whole different topic. Way more lenient. You shouldn't eat it if you see it. Because when you have an egg that begins to develop into a chick, and now you cooked it, that's called basar nevela. And the nakuda is that even if the other eggs in the pot are with their shell, well, I think it's called unshelled. It means you didn't remove the klipa. It's with the klipa. The klipa of a beitza is porous and it absorbs. So you got an issue with nois and tam. So normally, what would the rule be? You know which one has the nevela in it. It's about the time you have to have shishim, batul b'shishim. By eggs, in the case that I gave, you have to have 61 eggs. If I'm not mistaken, there are many reasons in the Rishonim. The main reason is because we also spoke about yesterday, shishim means 60 times in volume. Eggs, one egg can be smaller than the other. Even though they generally, they don't, I'm not talking about eggs that are, you can see, one is huge, one is little. But eggs might not be the same size. So to make sure that you have the shishim, by the eggs, they added another egg. I mean, that's not the topic right now. The topic is beitza shenetabla betavlin asurin. Now, tabla isurin will mean spices that are truma, asur for a zor, and everything we're learning, I know it's mesachta trumas, but you can have tavlin that is kilei kedem. You can have tavlin that's in the category of arla, if it came from a tree in the years of arla. Shvius, whichever problem. Hegdish. So the din is that don't tell me that since the egg is with the shell, the egg does not absorb. That's what the Mishnah is saying. Beitza shenetabla betavlin asurin. You should know, not only is the tam going, yes, to penetrate the shell, but it's even going to go into the yolk. No, one would think it penetrates the shell, so kedei klipa, so you don't have the white. Afilu chelmoin. Remember chelmoin? Chelmoin. Chelmoin mitamem is the yellow. Afilu chelmoin shalah is asur. A lot more on this tomorrow. Now, the final ruling of the Mishnah.
And check out your cholent.
Huh?
And check out your cholent eggs if you want to learn more about it.
I just think by the cholent, they crack. Here we're speaking, even if they didn't crack. But maybe the big chefs over here, they know how to put it now if they put it in wrappers, I don't know the din. If you double wrap it, but there's moisture that krichts in there. Okay, let's leave it at that. But he's right. People put eggs in a cholent. Mei kivashim umei shalakei shel truma. Here's the point. And this goes back to the whole Mishnah. In other words, when you began the Mishnah and you read that Tanakama says over here, according to our Girsa, that as a rule, not chisin, not olives, not the teradin, when you have vegetable and vegetables, and even though you pickle them together, the chulin vegetables remain permitted to a non-kohen, the vegetable is permitted to a non-kohen. But the waters themselves, the waters have in it also the tam from the truma. Mei kivashim, umei shalakais. Shel truma, they remain asurim le kohanim. Very good. And what's amazing is that according to the Tanakama, if you are going to use these liquids and you're going to put in it vegetables of chulin, according to our Tanakama, you will be allowed to eat those vegetables. Olives will be different. Amazing. Amazing. In other words, you would think that's the kasha, that what's the point of putting the vegetables in the pickling juice? It doesn't change it? It changes it. It pickles it. It becomes salty. Yes, but it doesn't absorb the tam. So I also want to just say that what is tam? What is das tam? It's not so clear. Are we completely separating tam from juice? Because the simplest way to understand flavor to me is juice. How does it absorb the tam? Because the juice of one goes into the other. But then that should be the ikir. We're not calling it the ikir. Just pointing out
Not necessarily, because even these are food with no juice, give the noise and time.
But the vapor, the zaya, like how does it get in there? Tam, abstract tam is a ruchni.
It sounds more like bereach, Rabbi. The actual fruit or whatever it is has also a texture. Tam does exist in the texture itself.
Tam cannot mean the texture. The texture is part of the ikir. This texture. Reach, see, I like it. Tam v're, that's what Shlem is saying. Al tam v're, that the tam is an inyan ruchni.
In Yeruchim, because it's Echol Mishishim, by why? In 59 you feel the time, in 69.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. So the biggest challenge in our Mishnah is that when we learn the sugi in Chulin, right, and Daf Kuf Yud Aleph and in other places, and when we learn this in Smich and Shulchan Aruch, we paskin, my friends, that that there's going to be in the Sinas Tam all through Kavush Shemavushal. And based on that, so we don't paskin like our Mishnah, which won't be the end of the world. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now, in the Bavli, there is a big machloikis Amoraim of the later Amoraim. What is Shitas Rabbi Yochanan? Clearly over here, what we have, Shitas Abaya only in Chulin, Bavli Kuf Yud Aleph, is the given Shita here in the Yerushalmi. That Rabbi Yochanan holds, that Kavush Kemavushal. And Rabbi Yochanan had a different gears on our Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, leis kan nechbashim. The Mishnah did not speak about pickling vegetables together. They will always be a problem. If they were pickled for 24 hours or more, I'll begin with that. Now, the emes is that when something is sharp, you don't even need to have 24 hours, but let's just leave it vague. That's what we learn in Shulchan Aruch. You know, in the fridge, just to understand. Many people cover their fridges on Pesach. People say, why do you cover your fridge? Now, I know that on Pesach, many times we go beyond the letter of the law, but in the fridge, we're not going that much beyond the letter of the law, because it's not uncommon, at least in my fridge, that something leaks. And you have glass shelves. I have glass shelves. Glass will hold the water. That means I can have chametz that's laying in liquid, laying on top of the glass shelf. We paskin, even though it's cold, kavush kemavushal. That means that 24 hours or more, there's going to be a belia, and I know that according to the Sfardim, glass b'chlal is not belia, but we paskin like that Amma. By the Ashkenazim, glass, like a klei cheres, not only is it belia, but you can't even kasher it. In other words, there can be the tam in it, because kavush kemavushal, and then on Pesach, you can have your Pesach kugel, and there can be liquid moisture, and it's laying on the same glass for 24 hours or more. That's a real problem. That's a halachic problem. And the solution is to put a cover. I get that. I'm just saying that, it's based on kavush kemavushal. The whole Mishnah doesn't work. And indeed, we're getting late. Leis kan nichbashim. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the whole Mishnah is learned different. The Mishnah is speaking about nishlakin by partial cooking. Partial cooking is weaker than kavush. Can you imagine? Why? Because I know I said the words kavush kemavushal, but the words in the Yerushalmi is kavush kiroiseach. And roiseach, bubbling, is much more than shlika. No, it's by shlika. Shlika doesn't mean partial cooking. Doesn't mean that the water was boiling, but you put it in there for less time. Shlika means that the water never got that hot. It's clear. When it's 212, I think, is the temperature that you need for water to boil. Depends on the height or something like that. So that's kavush kiroiseach. We'll go on, and therefore, it's not so difficult, but you have to go through the whole Mishnah like that. Now we're going back to our girsa. Rab Chanina, from the place of Tirta, says in the name of Rab Hoshaya that the Mishnah spoke about the category of chisis, right? And we said that that they do absorb even by pickling. The iked, I know, the iked was the truma has to be the sharp one. But in that itself, the Mishnah did not clarify, are we talking about only min b'she'enoi minoi, or even min b'minoi? Because that was really the machlokas Rab Shimon and Rabbi Akiva. Whether min b'minoi, even though there is, the sharp one will expel flavor, the other one will absorb it, but it's min b'minoi. So chasis b'chasis, even min b'minoi, he wants to make it clear that Tanakama and Abshimon are the same. Rabbi Akiva is the only one that argues. Rabbi Akiva is the one that's machadesh that min b'minoi, other than basar. The way the Marafulda learns is not a problem. Rabbi Akiva matir b'chachamim moisrim. In other words, it's Rabbi Akiva against everyone else. And now Rabbi Yasa b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, and these words will be amended. Have to be amended, but the first the tradition that they had was that it was said b'shem Rabbi Yochanan moidim chachamim Rabbi Akiva bebasar shu muter. Now these words pasha don't work. Why don't they work, guys? Rabbi Akiva is the one that says that min b'minoi is muter, by basar it's asur. So what was even the hava? What would this mean? That the chachamim hold like everyone else. Who cares? Min b'minoi, even though it's not discernible, that's a problem. Rabbi Akiva says basar is asur. So I want to say like this, that's where I got my not bar not. That the Rash Ilio, there are so many different ways of learning every line in the Gemara here. But if you look at mamish at the top, the end of the right column, top of the left column, basar b'basar muter. Now here's a go shleima. Basar shenis bashal biyorik, meat that was cooked with vegetables. What type of vegetables? Chasis shel truma, which means that means you have a garlic of truma, and you cooked meat with it. That means that the tam of the garlic went into the meat. That's vaday min de she'ena minoy and noch it's chas chisis. For hader v'nafal hay basar here. And now this meat shebala tam hatruma fell into a kedera roisachas, into a bishul, boiling pot, where there is basar of chulin. So the chiddush of this b'shem Rabbi Yochanan is that the basar of chulin is muter. Why shemuter? What's muter? Not the first basar. The basar hasheni. Ze davar bar noisen tamu. We call that not bar not. Now, even though that's not what Rabbi Yochanan said, but that would be one of the ways of understanding what he said. So that's the way Rabbi Yassa understood what Rabbi Yochanan said. So he quoted it. That even when there's a problem, not bar not. This is very important. No. We say not bar not by basar b'cholav is not a problem. Not so simple. Not bar not is a whole siman on Shulchan Aruch. Everything we're learning today is a big siman on Shulchan Aruch. Sharp. It takes away the 24 hours. Sharp it's the noise and tamel of gam after 24 hours is undone with sharp. Anya makes that yet. Even though this would make a lot of sense, but that's the way that Asherilio explains it. But the other Amoraim that heard it said that he couldn't have said that because it doesn't work. Rabbi Akiva is the one that says that basar b'basar is asur. So what are you saying? So Amar Rabbi Rabbi Yasa ve'ilu lo at Amar Hadam. If you wouldn't have said this, we would have said the opposite. What are you talking about? In other words, they understood Shlomo that when he said basar b'basar should be yasser. Like, wow, how can that be? Maybe, in other words, it's so shocking, it's so against everything that we learned. Maybe he said, which by the way is the way the Marafulda learned Rabbi Akiva. Now, indeed, Rab Zayda is taka right. Also, Rabbi Bo b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. That's taka what he said. That moed Rabbi Akiva lachachamim b'basar b'shu, which is way maraful to learn. Even though Rabbi Akiva learns min b'minoi remains muted even by bishul. It's shocking these things. Basar is an exception. Why? I don't know. They don't know. Now the Gemara says, you know what? That has to be that way. Rab Chanina shamalom in the Basra. Rab Chanina came to the same conclusion from the following. He learned in the Mishnah. He read the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Akiva Omer, oigevalt slate, kolam es bashum zem mutarim chutz min basar, which means ha basar b'basar is asur. Period. You can't have Rabbi Yochanan arguing with what Rabbi Akiva said. Now again, the way that Rashi Ilio explained Rabbi Akiva, we understand. And now the Gemara says, I'll make a better emendation. I don't even need. Why would I need Rabbi Yochanan to say that? Why did Rabbi Yochanan have to say it? Rabbi Akiva said it. That's the new problem. Rabbi Akiva said it. Dilma Isramat Eli. You know what he said? Moidim chachamim Rabbi Akiva. That's what that works. In other words, there is a machlokes. I get it. There is a machlokes when you have min b'minoi, asur and heter by bishul. Imagine, not be'en. You know which one is asur. You remove the isur, but the problem is nois and tam. Tam. There is a machlokes. So Rabbi Yochanan just made it clear, at least, that the chachamim are moide to Rabbi Akiva. They agree by basar. Everyone agrees by basar. The argument is not on side basar. And Rab Chananya said in the name of Rabbi B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, you know what? They finally came and said, that's exactly what he said. Moidim chachamim Rabbi Akiva, basar shu asur. And just to conclude, what is Rab Shimon? So Rab Shimon holds like Rabbi Yossi, guys, halt cup. Rab Shimon and Rabbi Yossi were not speaking about bishul. They were speaking about shlika. And by shlika, Rabbi Yossi said there was no imparting of flavor, only by teradin. Rab Shimon is saying two dinim. Number one, there's another exception. When a cabbage is with a cabbage, one from irrigated, one from baal. And then milsa gavurcha, maybe the ikir, even though it's min b'minoi. But what Rab Shimon did not say explicitly which one absorbs from which one. The one that's drier is more prone to absorb. He never said. So Rab Shimon, Amikruv Shal Shikya, Amar Rabbi Yossi, that in the yeshiva Havan, Svarin, Meimar, the Havamina was when they began to learn it, they thought that Shel Baal, a cabbage that grows in a field that was not humanly irrigated, it's only irrigated by the Baal Habas of the world, maybe that is less moist. B'meila, it's boileya. That was the Havamina, and it's amazing. But from the fact that Rafuna told his attendant that he had a Maisa Kedera. A Maisa Kedera, the second Marafulda doesn't say what it was, but it was a Meshubach. It was a Lenny's. It was a leader's. It was some very Gavaldik dish, and it was so tasty that Rafuna wanted for his vegetables to get some of that tam. So he told his attendant, Sav min iba v'haf lefelufa, pick from the irrigated field. Iba is what our Mishnah calls shikya, different words. Pick the cabbage from the irrigated field. And the falufa, falufa is the Maisa Kedera Gavaldik. Why did he say that? Because you saw from Rafuna that something that grows in a field that's irrigated actually comes out drier. You know, Americans are constantly irrigating. You ever saw a culture? People are walking around with 4 glasses of things. They're the most dehydrated people. When you irrigate, it goes the opposite. You should don't be dehydrated. Hada Amra Shel Sheki is the one that's Mileya. And what's the svara? The svara is it's like people that work too hard. The parnasa comes from the Eibishter. I think when people understand that it's all from the balabas, they have more. This is not to be irresponsible. But there was, I think, that the Barditcheva, you saw a person running in the market, running to do business. He told him, where are you running? He says, I'm running towards my parnasa. He told him, maybe you're running away from your parnasa. Loifnisht. We run to the Beis HaMedrash, and we have to run to Daven, and God willing to be continued.